Welcome to another episode of Unreal Engine Tutorials. Today we are going to do the stamina system. We made a very simple sprint. If we go to Content Blueprints, into Core and over to B_hero or whatever your hero is called, we made this sprint system last time. I might not have alluded to this before, but max walk speed is the speed at which you move. It's not actually walking. All this is doing is switching between 900 and 600. What we should do is set up a system where we start sprinting, deplete our stamina. Once our stamina is depleted, we go back to our normal walking speed. That's what we're going to do today. This is going to be a very long-winded system. Hopefully it doesn't blow out to 2 episodes. The first thing we're going to start with is a little bit of bug checking because we don't want to start depleting our stamina if we're not moving. To check if we're moving or not, we're going to right-click anywhere in the graph, get velocity. Of velocity, we're going to vector length, like we did when we were inside the animation blueprint. And we're also going to check if that is greater than 0. So a float greater than a float, and check if that is greater than 0. And then we just plug that into a branch. So essentially this script here is saying, are we moving? So we need to be moving if we want to start sprinting. And we're going to use this again later on. So if you want to copy all of that and paste it down below, if we pass that check, we're going to set a Boolean because there are a few other things we shouldn't be able to do while we're sprinting. So we're going to refer to this Boolean later. Let's go over to variables, hit the plus sign and call this is sprinting. We'll drag that in holding Alt. So if we are not moving, we will set this to true. Next, we'll do the actual task of setting our walk speed. And we'll copy down that character movement. We don't need this script anymore. That was just a placeholder. And now we're going to do something we did with our weapons back in the day. We're going to set timer by event. So this is essentially going to fire an event at a given interval, and that interval is going to be 0.1 seconds. And now we'll right click and create said event, custom event, and we'll call it drop stamina. So that's the event that's going to fire over. This is what's going to actually be dropping our stamina, and we have to click loop. If this doesn't work later on, make sure you've got loop selected here because otherwise the timer will just fire once. So now we can actually create the variable of stamina and start adjusting it. So let's add that variable there. We're going to add 2 variables here. The first is going to be called stamina actual, and that's going to be a float. And yes, that's right. If we have stamina actual, then that means we're going to have a stamina max, assuming that we can increase the amount of stamina we have via a skill tree, which the skill tree is coming out. I've had a comment requesting for a skill tree. It is on the way. It's just a little bit more advanced. So now we can start messing with these variables. Let's drag this event over here, and just the same as our other lines, we can actually double click here and get some reroutables. So I'm going to route this like so. Trying to keep it pretty so we can understand what's going on. And now we're going to drag in a stamina actual and a stamina max. We're going to use these 2 variables with a clamp. Obviously the max value here will be stamina max, and then we're going to use stamina actual with a negative, a float minus float, making sure that stamina actual is in the top one. And we're going to subtract by 0.1. You can play with, say, the timing value and the subtraction value if you'd like, but for now, I'm just going to set them as these generic values and get this working. You can fine tune this later. So with those 2 set up, this equation, let's just select all of that and press Q. That equation, that return value is going to go into our stamina actual. Like so. That's what's actually driving our stamina. With that dropping down continuously, what we're going to do after this is check if this value is equal to 0. So every 0.1 seconds, we're going to drop a bit of our stamina, check if it's equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, we don't need to do anything. But the moment it is equal to 0, and we don't need to go equal or less than them because our minimum value of the clamp is 0, so we won't go any lower. The moment it is, then we're going to fire off the script that will designate how to get out of our sprint. Now, because we're going to do some more script on the other side of this, we're going to drop this down. And luckily, this little guy here is exactly what we need next up. Every 0.1 seconds, I also want to check if we've stopped moving. So if we're sprinting and we've stopped moving, then this event will know to cut itself out and run off this. So let's grab an OR on the end of this. So we're checking to see if 1, our stamina has hit 0, or 2, if we've stopped moving. Now, because we're running off the true for this particular branch, though, we need to put a not boolean here, or a lesser than. So is our movement less than, say, 0, or even equal to? And if it is equal to, then we'll stop sprinting, which is what's going to happen here. So if it's time to stop sprinting, the first thing we'll do is grab our boolean and set that to false. And then we're going to stop this timer, clear and invalidate timer by handle. This little node here is a handle. Now here, because I've dragged off there, the executables decided to connect there. We don't want the executable connected there. We want this specifically firing over if we've run out of sprint time. And there's not really any way to stop these two from overlapping, because if I was to move this entire event up to stop that from overlapping, then this line would be overlapping here. So we're going to have to live with this overlap. Once we've cleared the timer, we'll also set our character movement back to 600. So now, as far as the player is concerned, we have stopped sprinting. But there's one last thing we need to do before we can continue. We need to start bringing our stamina back up. We need to raise stamina. In this case, we're going to essentially reverse this script that we have here for this event. We're going to set timer by event. We'll plug that in there. We're going to create another custom event, and that custom event is going to be raise stamina. And if we want, we could drag it all the way over here. I'm not going to do that just right now because I'll do some cleanup later. For now, I want to get this set up. So let's grab our stamina actual and our stamina max. Let's get ourselves a clamp for a float. Plug in stamina max into the max value like we did before. 0 is fine for the minimum. And here, instead of subtracting, we're going to add. And I'm actually going to add a point of stamina for every time this timer sets. And you can see here, I've already forgotten to punch in the values, 0.1 and looping. So the stamina will recharge a little bit faster in here, but again, change it to whatever you'd like. We'll grab our stamina actual there, drag that in there. And so the result of this clamp will be our actual stamina.